News gang. So let's look at the president. He's spoken 4 times. Today was the 4th since the whole thing started. The first one happened 2 days after the first case was diagnosed in Kenya. He gave a raft of measures that included shutting down schools and that sort of thing. The second one was more interesting because it was about balloons, I think it was. The third one is where he outlined those measures, financial measures, all the income and cessation of movement and all of that. And then today, the 4th one. What stood out today? I mean,
first, even in the
2,600 word speech that came to 32 pages in all.
Absolutely. Actually,
it was actually 2,602 words.
2,602 it was. Okay.
In terms of comparison, I think today he had a better speech than he did last time. Today, at least the number of issues that he dealt with was kind of more concise than last time. And unlike last speech when we had to decipher what he meant by within, in, out, today there was more clarity, but there probably needs to be further clarity on the categorization of the needy cases. Because at this point, everybody will claim to be needy. I mean, somebody has lost a job, somebody's business is not doing well, they cannot make as much as they were. So almost everybody is now needy.
In Uganda, actually, they've had to stop giving out food so that they can determine how they do the rationing of food and whatever. And those are things that are likely to come. I mean, how many people in this country would not go for free food if it exists somewhere?
Everybody would want it. And you know, if it is left to the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, does it mean only those who are registered as vulnerable groups will benefit from this facility, or will the 2019 census data be used to identify where are these households? Because I mean the data shows clearly who earns what, who has a job, who doesn't have a job, and so on and so forth. Are we going to use that data to reach out to as many people as possible? And at the same time, how do you guard against personal interest, especially by those who are going to determine who is a deserving case and who is not a deserving case? So you're saying the
speech today was more focused but needed more clarity?
Especially on that part about, you know, sharing these resources to the vulnerable people. But more importantly, I think there is also need to clarify a few more things as we move forward in terms of how much money is available to do certain things. You saw the confrontation between SRC and some governors in terms of how much money should be given to health workers, whether it should be given or not, and how it should be given. When the president now says the Ministry of Public Service should now come up with a welfare package, let's see what that welfare package will entail and who will be covered in that welfare package. Because at the same time, don't be surprised if you hear other people say, us too, we want.
I think we have that soundbite, Gashuri. Robert, if you can hear me, Uhuru speaking about the welfare package.
The welfare package,
Recognizing the critical importance of health, mental and emotional needs of our frontline medical doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals, I am today directing the Ministry of Public Service and the Ministry of Health to develop a welfare package to cushion these frontline officers, especially during this challenging time. This should include actions by medical insurance companies to cover the health requirements of our hospital staff, especially those dealing with this pandemic.
Interesting. Linus, apart from the shot, how is the president doing four speeches later, 1 month later?
Well, the shot is an issue, actually. There's something going on with the presidential wardrobe.
Working from home, Linus.
Yes,
Hashtag WFH.
Yes, it's giving that impression of laxity. You look at that shirt and you remember Hawaii. You can only imagine the trouser that goes with that.
Sure.
Delivery.
But
Dressing is part of delivery. And I know we spoke about the speech last week. I think there's a serious issue with the wardrobe in terms of how the president wants also to be perceived. Look at all his officers today, the ministers that were, and who are not visible, by the way, because they had to be on the sides. They were properly dressed. For God's sake, it's Thursday in the Republic of Kenya, where we are used to a culture of dress down only on Fridays. But if you do that for the week, what kind of message are you sending? And by the way, we've seen some of the ministers picking it up. Permanent, this is principal secretaries.
There's something wrong with that name, but you know.
Yeah, there's something wrong with that name as well. That's a discussion for another time. But dressing down in the course of the week, there's a certain message that you're going to send. If Francis Gashuri, a very able guy, decides to come here with his Liverpool top, he'll do the show very well, but he'll not be delivering the right message in terms of presentability. So on that one, that has been a real problem. The president cannot work from home. That is why in other places, including the US, even a flying aircraft is considered a state house. That is why the president has state houses across the country, because he's considered to be working throughout. And work has a dress code. And it's changing so rapidly in Kenya you know, it's an assault on our tradition. You know, traditions are there. There have been 3 presidents before him, and there's a way they dressed. We knew when they were in Mombasa, this is how they dress. None of them ever dressed that way in Nairobi, to the best of my recollection. In times of crisis, and this is a president we've seen wearing military fatigue because he wanted to convey a certain message. So COVID, with some of this very interestingly patterned shirt, I'm not sure about the dress code that is going on in the government right now, whether it's giving that impression of the seriousness it deserves. But overall, Joe, you asked about his performance. You can only compare the president with other presidents. And I think Yvonne pointed out the story of Ghana. Ghana President Nana Akufo-Addo has been very specific on what he's talking about. We've seen the president today in that soundbite saying he's directing the ministry to develop packages. You see, the presidency is the office of last resort. You come, you appear because you have the last resort. You are saying you told your ministries through your back channels to develop a package. And here it is. And here it is.
You don't direct them at a press conference.
We know you're supposed to direct them. That's your duty. Or even on telephone, even on, you know, do that, do the background work, and come to the press conference and deliver specifics. Because, Joe, the president runs one risk. He runs the risk of his briefings being compared to those briefings of Coffee House.
Yeah.
Which is not nice, because those are his direct reports. The president needs to understand that when he now stands to speak,
he should say, I have directed and this is what they have come up with.
Yes.
Okay.
The numbers can be done by CAS Mwangangi. That's not your bit. Just go to specifics, and they had better be as grave as announcing a curfew.
You know,
and
like,
you don't do that in Akitenge.
Linus, that now that you said that, there was something interesting that he was saying about the school calendar and all these worries about the exam. And actually thought he was going to make an announcement of what's going to happen. So he's saying he has directed the Ministry of Education officials to kind of examine and analyze, or whatever it is,
to come up with steps to mitigate negative effects on students
on some of the measures that we are taking.
We shouldn't see the president thinking aloud. We shouldn't see him thinking aloud. We should see him making the decisions, giving us the position of his thought process.
So actually, because you see, like, my daughter asked me, like, did the president say something about education? The president was still speaking, you know, about school and all of that. And then I heard him mention it, then I told her, oh yeah. Then when he was done, I'm thinking, like, okay, what did he actually say about that thing? Because he said things that I'm not too sure I understood what he was trying to say. But he was saying he was going to ask his ministry people to kind of figure out what the effects, the negative effects will be, and how to mitigate that. Yet, actually, what people want to know is what is going to happen now that the school calendar has been disrupted. Our kids are going to do some kind of, online thing that is more structured. What about the kids who are in the villages who cannot, for example, access all of these things? Because then we got talking about this with a friend, and we were saying, like, you know what? There are actually kids who have never got access to all of those things that people are talking about. I don't know, Zoom and Google Classroom, and they went to some village somewhere, and they don't know that anything about school is going on.
There is a bigger concern, and I hope this can be addressed as quickly as possible. We have millions of students in primary school and secondary school who are supposed to sit for KCP and KCSE this year. So at that point when I heard the president talk about education, I hope there would be some sort of decision with finality. This is what we are working on. These are the scenarios we are looking at, so that these candidates can start preparing mentally, psychologically, and think about it. Because there's no bigger surprise than this situation is resolved and you're told, okay, exam inaendelea or something like that.
I think
because you see the exams are already set. So there needs to be clarity on what are we doing. And at the same time, there are parents who have children at home. There's a question of how much school fees was paid for the first time and so on and so forth. Whether the lost time will be recovered, does it mean that we are going to forego school holidays, the remaining school holidays, once the situation is resolved? There is need for, clear-cut solutions and proposals and directions on this. Otherwise, it's going to add on to the confusion.
Yvonne, if I may, on schools, even Gashuri, you talk about people want to know what next, what's the calendar, will we have holidays, or we'll forego it just to make up for the days that the students have been home. Also issues about school fees. For those who go to private schools, they're asking themselves, are we going to get a discount? In the school fees that we were going to pay in the next term.
Even for high schools, because they still pay something.
And I remember Minister Magoha was saying, my children have just been home for 3 weeks, wacheni wapumzike. He didn't seem too worried when he was speaking a couple of days back at the Ministry of Health during a briefing by the Minister for Health. But there are also those parents who had not even budgeted to have their kids home for this long around this time. So they're also struggling. And there are those children also who used to depend on the food for schools, the food in schools. That's what they used to depend on. Now they don't have that anymore. So there are a lot of things that need to be looked at in terms of children. And then something else the president spoke about today, he didn't really elaborate, is now life after COVID-19. What would happen? He said something about re-engineering existing plans and policies. What exactly does that mean? Do we really have something in mind in terms of, okay, COVID-19 imeisha, we need to go back to our normal lives, but then how do we sort of like go back with having the minimum disruption possible? So are we thinking about that?
Yes.
Is there already a team in place?
Which is why I think what needs to happen beyond hearing from the CS or Ministry of Health every day is to hear from the Minister for the Cabinet Secretary for Education. I know we've heard a little bit from Munya, and he's talking about fishing and farming. I think Oparanya had mentioned, yes, Oparanya mentioned that they're providing seeds, treasury, and so these are sort of things that would reduce the anxiety amongst Kenyans, because all we hear every day is 9 cases, 10 cases, 5 cases, but it would be refreshing to hear what this ministry is doing. This is what we are thinking about. This is what we are considering. We hear you when parents say this. We hear the frustration of students. We hear the frustration of small businesses, of private sector, of government sector, so that then it even makes this whole period a little bit more bearable and manageable just in our minds, because all we hear is this number of cases, and then inakuwa ni msomo, which at some point also just sort of loses it. But then the one person we did hear from was from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, considering everything that's been happening with Kenyans abroad, particularly in countries like India and China.
And we think we have a minister speaking about it, Yvonne?
Sorry, the PS.
Yeah, we actually when you're speaking about evacuations,
Because telling us just to send planes haiwezekani. Ndege inabeba watu 200 na ikienda Hungary sio ati huko itakuta 12. Then from there it cannot begin jumping around picking up sio matatu. You see, this is a serious problem.
Do you have measures even to cater for those who are able to afford on their own?
Even if you were to evacuate 30,000, 10%. Imagine that they are all not in the same country, so your planes would be flying in different directions. Pick up 100 here, 1,000 there, 5,000 there. It is an impossible proposition, Mr. Chairman.
Linus, I think.
Of course, I'm raring to go first.
Yeah, no, you were there.
Obviously, I was there. And
you got a front row seat.
But good luck, we were the only TV station there. So I listened to all this, and to some extent I was horrified. Horrified in the sense that, you know, there are people out there who desperately want to come back. And yes, it is not possible to bring back everybody, but it is possible to facilitate some people to come back on need basis. And I saw members of the Foreign Relations and Defense Committee in the National Assembly shocked when the PS was telling them some of these things. I could see some even angry at his response. And what I think is also very important for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to deal with is image, perception. When you're deemed to be indifferent, that it's like you don't care, like it's not a big deal. You know, there are people who went to India to take their sick patients there. Some of those people have lost their patients there. Why? Because, I mean, they have taken long in recuperation. The amount of money they carried with them is depleted. Yeah. So some are in despair and they cannot be able to come back. Show empathy. Show these people that you care, the government cares. But when you shrug your shoulders like whatever, it doesn't send a good it doesn't send the right. You may be saying the correct. You may be saying the correct thing. You may be saying the correct thing because
not at all. It's not correct.
Oh, hold on. Saying the correct thing in the sense that, or saying the practical thing in the sense that it's not possible to bring everybody back. I had this PS talking about a rough estimate of about 4.5 billion shillings to bring back a very small amount of, a very small size, number of people, 4.5 billion shillings. You see, it's not just a money issue. It's also an emotional issue. It's about empathy. Yeah. Show it. It doesn't cost anything to show that empathy. That you
understand.
We understand. When you kind of...
You know, Gashuri, you speak about India, Joe. I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah.
If there is a national of that country who is out there in a situation of distress, whether they have been kidnapped by some people, they are stranded, one person stranded in whichever way. I mean, in the US, I have seen them dispatch even former presidents and deploy them to try and negotiate, do whatever it takes, so that this one person whose name we probably didn't know before that crisis happened, it comes back home. I mean, isn't that how governments do it out there?
Exactly, because at the end of it all, these people are Kenyans. They were Kenya. It doesn't matter what circumstance under which they found themselves in those countries, illegal or not, they are Kenyans. Tuwatafute njia ya kuwasaidia in any way, shape or form. Because you speak about India, there are people who are there. I was in India, we barely made it out with my mother who had been unwell a week before that they shut down. And I kept thinking, what if it had been us who had been locked down in India for this long? Because the treatment is over, but you still have to pay for the hotel, you have to pay for the food. And it's a strange place with language barriers and a lot of other issues.
And you can't get a commercial flight even if you had the money.
You can't. And now people's money is running out. They're asking for help. They don't know what they're going to do. Mgonjwa wako probably ashapona, yuko pale. And it's really crazy to hear your government, your PS talking about this situation in such a way that you see you are left alone, Nivo, shauri yako, you find a way of surviving. What are these people supposed to do, honestly? In a foreign land, you can't go back home. You don't know how long this the coronavirus will keep everywhere shut down, that you can't leave. I think it's very insensitive.
Linus, very undiplomatic from a diplomat.
Very, and coming from Ambassador Kamau, who is very experienced. He is one of the best we have out there. I don't think he'll watch those clips of himself proudly. I don't think he can face those sound bites, because those sound bites brought out a side that is not even diplomatic. And actually, it points out to some private failings, because some people can actually accurately describe it as not just insensitive, but very arrogant. When you tell people, a committee of parliament, that planes can't fly in all directions, you know, you're sounding as if you are addressing retards, people who don't know how aeroplanes operate. in the first place. He showed a lot of contempt to that committee, but by extension, contempt for to Kenyans. Then he did something worse. He went on to try and explain why people are being thrown to the streets in China.
That was a few days ago?
Yes.
Right? Earlier in the week.
It was a day earlier.
It was the day before the same day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he spoke like a very able spokesperson of the landlords of Guangzhou, because he said, you know, they are required to go because of quarantine reasons. Look, brings back the issue, you know, we drew a picture of the Ministry of Health earlier, and it's time we drew a picture of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs leadership. First of all, the CS, Rachel Omamo, has been missing. I really hope she's in the country.
She's in the country. I was going to ask whether she's out there somewhere.
She's in the country.
And can come back home.
And if she is, I think she's taking foreign a bit too literally. She's supposed to be front of office leadership. PS is actually the accounting officer in the ministry. He has no business going out making the sort of mistakes that he was making yesterday on behalf of the ministry. And finally, to the point that Jamila did raise, a passport has a lot of meaning. Passports mean a lot. In fact, there is the name of the president. It says in the name of the President of the Republic of Kenya, let this person go without let or hindrance. What is the meaning of Kenyan passports? Does the Ministry of Foreign Affairs understand? Because if they do, then they'll know that regardless how they got there, whether the Kenyans in Guangzhou or Beijing or Wuhan have permits to be in those countries or not, they are citizens of this nation. And it's the duty, not some side job of the government, to fill the shoes of each member of this republic. And they have let down the people that are in Guangzhou being beaten up in the streets, the ones that are stuck in Indian hospitals and Indian towns because they cannot come back, ostensibly because planes cannot fly in all directions.
Actually,
I think it's a shameful thing.
Actually, for the people in China, he said, "Hao ni vijana wanapiga kelele kwa social media." Do you remember that soundbite? And then he said there are about 100 or so who were caught up in this situation, that they had no passports. I mean, they had no papers, or they went there illegally, or they had overstayed there. Granted, they may be there illegally, all those things, but does not take away, one, their fundamental human rights. And I thought it was help them first, then punish them.
Later, yeah.
Not say mjisot because you're there illegally. But I want to look at the bigger picture. What Ambassador Kamau did in Parliament and the news conference the day before should also tell us something about the leadership of the ministry. You see, every ministry at this point, especially ministries that are intricately involved in the COVID-19 situation, I mean, you've seen CSs out there dealing with the situation. You've seen CS ICT, Mushero, talking about a few things, even in the joint press conferences with Mutai Kagwe, the Minister for Health. You've seen Magoha, the Minister for Education. At this point, maybe we should also have seen the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Not maybe.
I'm using maybe very, very carefully. Very carefully.
Okay.
Maybe we should have seen her, but I'm not surprised that we have not seen her.
Okay.
Gashuri, we need to go to something else that has been going viral.
Joe, can I just say one last thing related to the broader picture that Gashuri is raising, and it's the issue of our foreign policy. Yeah. It's not robust enough. It's very submissive. The AU did summon the Chinese ambassador to the AU to explain what was going on there. And you are in the meeting room. You heard what Ambassador Kamau said.
He defended
about
the Chinese ambassador.
Yes, he defended the Chinese ambassador. He wouldn't summon them.
So we are...
He told us how he communicates and likes to communicate.
Those other people and dismissive of our own.
We have an incoherent foreign policy, and you know, it speaks of weakness.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what the MP for Gilgil said. Yeah, it seems like we're in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
But you know, there's also other abusive relationships.
One of the abusive relationships is definitely in Jubilee. I would want to look at it that way. Because even in the midst of the COVID-19 situation, bitter as it is, painful as it is, there's also a lot of depression in Jubilee, so to say. Look, we've been treated to a series of letters, left, right, and center. The Register of Political Parties, 149 members of parliament from Jubilee, sending protest letters to the Register of Political Parties on the manner in which some changes were made. And timing in politics is everything. Everybody was focused on COVID-19, but some things were also happening behind the scenes, Joe.
Interesting, because all those letters that have been flying around and the press releases and all of those things have all borne the Jubilee letterhead. I mean, it doesn't get more confusing than that, because this is a cacophony of unprecedented proportions in that party, because they have been told, they've been telling us all of this months and I should say years that, you know, Chama Iko Imara, we are together, that these works of detractors who want to drive a wedge between who and who in the party. But now we have a situation where the Secretary General Raphael Tuju is firing a letter, the Deputy Party Leader, the Deputy President is firing a letter, Caleb Kositany, Deputy Secretary General is firing, and all of these letters are on Jubilee letterhead. For me, that struck me quite as quite odd, and it spoke quite clearly about the discordance that is there in this party that is supposed to be the governing party. When you see, for example, people who are supposedly in the governing party exchanging tweets, very, very, very vicious tweets. They are not complimentary tweets, vicious tweets on social media. I mean, messages on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever else they have been doing this, in the full public glare. Like, what is really going on? Does it mean that Kositany, for example, or Tuju, they don't talk to each other to say, hey, what is this that has happened at the registrar? Does it mean that the Deputy President doesn't talk to the Secretary General, or indeed to the party leader? Because he said the other day that they actually talk quite regularly. So what is going on there? Because his tweet said that, you know, I know the President is not part of this and cannot be part of this.
This is what he said. The President and party leader did not and cannot be party to any fraudulent and illegal changes to officials of our party. This is the work of political rejects, conmen and fraudsters whose party allegiance is already elsewhere.
It doesn't get worse than that.
But Yvonne, look, the scenario as is no doubt that Jubilee is in trouble, huge trouble. And look at the fragmentation. Even at the neck level, there are officials who are allied to the Deputy President and those who are allied to the President. And so the scenario that you see here is more of those who are pro-President versus those who are pro
the Deputy President. You know, this is the shadow boxing that we have seen happening, I think, since the handshake of March 9th. You know, and it's proxy wars. So those who are allied to the Deputy President are not attacking the president or the party leader directly. So first it's that it is Raila, it is ODM, it is the handshake, and then now on this issue it is political rejects whose allegiance is elsewhere. What I find interesting in this entire thing is that the president is silent. He's absolutely silent. You know, in all of this, surely if this was something that he did not support, do we not think by now he'd have come out and said, wait, what's happening in my party? What did you do? You made changes to the NMC. I did not sanction this. I mean, you have the Secretary General who says he spoke to the party leader and that if anyone has a problem, take it up with him. In all of this, you know, the one person that remains silent is the party leader. Nobody says anything. And I think it looks like, for me, the minute we're done with COVID-19, we will pick up from politics right where we started. I think we will just, you know, from that full stop, we will now write the next sentence and carry on. And I think also what's obvious from this one is that Jubilee has served its purpose. Its purpose was to get President Uhuru Kenyatta to power.
A second term.
For his second term. Now that that is done, this is over. You know, and that is what we see with
but the question is, who's
here.
not getting that? I mean, because they don't seem to get that it is over.
And it underscores the role of political parties.
What if it is not over? What if it is not over?
What, the party?
Yeah, what if it is not over?
Because I think Yvonne Gashuri has a point.
Well, if it isn't, surely you have a deputy party leader who just days before, when he had that press conference he said he and the president speak very often. Now you'd imagine that they speak very often, or perhaps more so, with party matters. One is a party leader, the other is a deputy party leader, yet he seemingly addresses him on Twitter. I mean, all is not well. If you take a look at the history of political parties, this is just falling in line with that. When it was TNA and URP forming the Jubilee Alliance, once it got President Uhuru Kenyatta to the first term, what did? They folded up all of the parties and put it into Jubilee to get him into power. I mean, the same thing, this is exactly...
the fickleness of our political parties. But Gashuri had a point, because if you look at Jubilee in 2013, Jubilee was big. It came and swept the board, won a majority of seats, became the party that brought Uhuru and Ruto to power. And I feel even for the deputy president, he's invested a lot in this party. And I don't think he would easily want to let it go. Right. That's why I think he's coming out and fighting in public with the tweets and the letters and everything. And when we see this in public, reminds me of what Gashuri always says about vita ndani ya nyumba. How your fights should be in the house. Don't come outside and stand at the gate so that all the neighbors can know what's happening, what is going on in your house. And you need to have a father figure to be able to say, hey, tulieni. And you mentioned it. Where is the president in all this? Murathe said that Tuju, as the Secretary General of the party, cannot make any announcements or any directives.
Actually, he said he cannot be a madman to make such a decision without consulting the party leader. So what exactly is happening in Jubilee? I don't think we've seen the last of it, Yvonne, despite the history we have with the fickleness of our parties, where tuna form a year to election and then the next one tunavunja, tunaunda nyingine. I feel both parties have invested a lot in Jubilee, and I don't think anyone is willing to let go of it just now. Linus, there's this story every so often told that chama iko na wenyewe.
You see, when you look at the DNA of Jubilee Party, Jubilee is designed to be a party for elections, not a party for governance. There's a huge difference. There's a lot of excitement that attends to any talk of election-related stuff within Jubilee. This is 2022 gets the deputy president's side very, very excited. And you saw in Sagana, the president's side also gets excited with regional politics. There is a problem with Jubilee because it's very excited about running for elections and probably winning them, but not the dirty work of governing. How else can we explain that this conversation about 3 officers nobody knows about, replaced by another set of appointees nobody knows about, and that dominates the headlines when we have COVID-19? That is a party shy of governance. They love politics, and I think the struggle right now is just about 2022. But you know what? COVID is on. COVID-19 is on. You can't skip it.
But it's a tie, so to say. I mean, you see politics on one hand and you see COVID on the other hand. But also the timing, that maybe all this was meant to Chinyamaji, and then maybe when the COVID situation is dealt with, then you realize later, this happened. And you'll be asked, how didn't you know that this happened?
I mean, I think it puts the deputy party leader in a very tricky position. So, you know, the timing is, I mean, from a political masterstroke of betrayal, it's spot on, right? You do all of these things now. You claim it is in line with...
it's routine.
Yes, it's routine. It's actually following the Political Parties Act. Yeah. But you see, what this does is it puts the deputy president and his allies in a difficult position. So one, they've got to say something about this. It's happening, you know, under the cover of COVID-19. And if they don't say something about this now, at some point, 6 months, a year from now, they'll be asked, haya, mukusema, you know, earlier on when this happened. And on the other hand, it makes him look bad for raising issues like these when the country is in the middle of what is arguably, you know, its biggest fight yet for its survival of its citizens, of its economy, of its health, and of its people. So it puts him in a very tricky position. But for me, it also raises the questions about political parties in this country and whether they are formed for the ideals, whether it's an association of people who have similar ideals, or whether it is, you know, like I've talked about, a special purpose vehicle. And also bringing in gaps in the Political Parties Act and the powers of the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, because what it does say is that that office can talk about, you know, recommend that, you know, you follow the laws and make sure you do elections, but they have no real way of enforcing elections within parties. I mean, if you want to take a look at Jubilee, it is not the only party, you know, that is in this. 66 other parties find themselves in this exact position. I guess this is just bigger because it's happening in Jubilee. I mean, ODM has not had elections since 2014. The last time we saw that, it was the Men in Black saga. But the political parties, the registrar of that, really has no way. They just say, you know what, it would be nice if you guys did this and make sure you file your returns before March the 30th, you know, of every year. Yeah. But really,
what should concern all of us, I mean all of us as Kenyans, is that, you see, political parties previously were funded by members and by politicians and everybody else. But today, political parties are funded by the Political Parties Fund. About 800 million shillings was allocated to the Political Parties Fund in the 2019-2020 budget. So Jubilee, by virtue of being, I mean, the party with a majority in the House and that got more presidential votes, so to say, gets a big chunk of that money, maybe about 500 million or thereabouts. So it should concern you because it is your taxpayers' money that is being used. And all these games that are going on, it's about your money. Actually, you're funding the shenanigans, the games that you see. And also the control for political party organs. Like, if you control NEC, if you control the National Management Committee, if you control the Elections Board, if you control the parliamentary group, then you control the party.
But that is where the problem is. Why should one faction or other control? I mean, if it's one party. I think that is where the problem is.
And you know, it's interesting that in Jubilee, the NEC has not met. There's been no PG. They've had no elections. You know, there's something wrong.
Elections are supposed to be in March.
In March, there's something wrong with our political parties and how they're run, and I think it's just manifesting itself in Jubilee.
Thank you, Yvonne, Kashuri, Joe, Linus. We need to wind up, and it's time for our final words.